I'm going to give a brief rundown on a question that I get asked often. And since I get asked it pretty often, I figured I'd make a quick video and explain it. I've been asked a lot of times how I've been testing for water content and fuel, and we check that based on the volumetric density, based on the specific gravity of the fuel. And it sounds more complicated than it is, so I'm going to show you how that actually works, and try and just do a brief non-certified test of the fuel and kind of give you an idea how it works. I'm not going to bore anybody with the math on it. That's all pretty well available online, and it's pretty common to find this information. So I'm going to spin it around here and show you how we go about doing it. So let me clean up my mess here a little bit so I can show you guys and get it a little closer. This one is actually for gasoline, which I don't have prepared right now. But the one everybody's interested in anyway is actually ethanol fuels, the E85, E90. I actually have some contaminated fuel here, so I can show you what actually happens. This is the result of leaving your gas cans out in the rain at the track. Take care of your race fuels, boys, or you'll end up messing some stuff up. So this is a basic hydrometer. This one's actually designed for alcohol content. I'll show you that too, maybe. So we let her get balanced in there, and you can see the proof rating on it is about 90. This is based on a temperature of 60 degrees. I don't know if you guys can see the reading there, but it's based on the temperature of 60 degrees, and we are hitting on the PR of 90 right there. And what that says is that the alcohol content in this fuel is actually 90 proof, which leaves us at 45% alcohol. And you figure that out based on whatever proof is. You know, you can divide that by 2, because that's what you'll get on your alcohol percentage. So this roughly 90% is roughly 45% alcohol content. So if this was an ethanol at the pump, it would be E45 technically. But we get a little bit more serious about it when we're trying to test to get the specifics. So we know right now the shop is at 20 degrees Celsius, which is pretty easy to find out. That means it is comfortable 68 degrees in here. That 68 degrees means that the room temperature of it, which I need to convert back to Celsius because that's what this is based on, is 20 degrees Celsius. So what that can tell you is when you go to your fueling charts, pretty easy to find any of these online. There's a lot of information on volumetric density of gasoline. This one here is specifically gasoline. So you know that the temperature in the shop is about 20 degrees, but whoop, still not on that page. Get on down here. So we can make correction factors. This was based on 60 degrees. Right now it is 20 degrees in here, and we know based on this one is for gasoline up to a 15% max ethanol. So this gives us our calculation to figure out what the actual density is. If we were talking about gasoline here, which we are not, you would find the specific gravity of it. Gasoline is usually roughly in the neighborhood of the 0.77 is what I've been finding around here in our area. So we would dip this in there and find that we have the contents about the specific gravity where it belongs based on temperature. And it's pretty easy to convert. Like I said, I'm not going to bore you with the math because that's available online with plenty of charts. but what I am going to show you is a good example that will make it a little bit easier to understand. Let me get this dumped out. So, clear the bugs out of here. To make a little bit more sense of it, this is what I'm going to do. This is a familiar brand. I don't know if I'm supposed to show off the brand or not, but 190 proof, meaning 95% alcohol content. So this would be E95 at the pump. That's how you understand that. So E85 is supposed to be 85% alcohol content. But this should make a little bit more sense how that works. This is grain alcohol from the liquor store. We put our alcohol content hydrometer in here, and if you can see it, well, you can't see it, can you? That is setting right about the 190 mark. So the above the water line is what you're looking for. So we're seeing the 190 right above the water line. That means that this is, again, 190 proof, giving us 95% alcohol. And we can do the same thing with ethanol fuels. Because when you contaminate it, and I actually have some water here, I can show you what happens when we contaminate it. Actually, let me reduce this down. I'm going to contaminate this with some just regular water out of the hose. You can already tell by the color and the mixture that this is not clear. So that tells us a lot. Also some trash floating in it from my can. But we have now converted it from 190 proof down to roughly 120 proof, giving us a 60% alcohol content. And that is suggesting that we've got this temperature around 60 degrees, which is what this is based on. And again, it said temperature of 60 degrees or 15.5 Celsius is what the temperature is based on. And again, we're able to correct that with volumetric correction factor sheets. No big deal to find online. No big deal to do the math and figure out. Of course, I have the gasoline one out because that was the last thing I was testing. But pour this one out. I do have the gasoline I was testing, and I would like to show it to you, but I actually broke the glass, so now I don't have a deep enough glass to get us down to the 0.7 specific gravity marks. We need a deeper container. So I think that's about a quick explanation on that. Then we can take it another step. We can take it another step further. So we know, well, this one's not contaminated. So we can also figure it based on base it based on the freezing point. So we can do that with a basic spectrometer. This one's good for a handful of things, making sure your washer fluid, your methanol content's good, and your tanks and that kind of thing. But you put a few drops on the glass, close it up and smash it in real good, and then I don't know if this will let us show it through the camera or not. I'll try. No, I don't believe we're going to see it. Oh, maybe. There it is. We might make this work. So, this is hard for me to hold, but this is the ethylene is the closest thing we got here. We can see that the freezing point on this is negative 15 degrees, meaning that that's what we can use to go against our charts and see what the freezing point was. This is also a good unit for, I'm not sure if you were able to see it, but I'm going to show it again if I can get it back on there. This is also how we test DEF fluid and a handful of other things. Spectrometers are great when they work, and it's hard to show on camera. I'm trying. If I can point it out. There we go. Okay. Oop. So on this same gauge, it's easy to find. Well, when you hold it up to your eye, it's easy to find. But it actually tells you quite a bit of content. These are good to have around the shop. So, it might be hard to see. I can't get this thing lined up. There we go. So when you look through this thing, you're going to see this one here is able to test for your battery specific density. You can check against ethylene, and it even has washer fluid and DEF fluid already marked on here. But yeah, you can test the charge of a battery based on a few drops of the acid on your spectrometer. There's a lot of different types of these, and it's kind of based on how light hits it and refracts back. Might not be using the right word there. But those are pretty easy to find also. And we are also able to test some fuels that way too and check their specifics. There's a lot of great information out there, a lot of great units of measurement that everybody uses and how they use it against things. But this is a basic understanding of, can we check for E85 at the pump and make sure it's actually 85% alcohol. So a lot of times you'll go to the pump and you wonder, is this actually E85? Is this going to be a quality fuel for running in? You know, some of the motors we build are very expensive, and you know, times at the track really matter a lot. I know I've done a lot of explaining on our injector machine on how we're able to use that we're able to check for the actual how I calibrate that machine. And so this is why I ask a lot of questions, like when you're at the track and have asked me for a tune file, and you say, hey Steven, it's 100% humidity out here, about to rain, we got 2 more passes in, we want to make them count. And then I always ask you for the weather station file. You send this over to me, and what I'm looking for is the barometric pressure outside, and I'm going to look at the temperature, the base temperature of what I'm assuming is in your gas tank, as close as I can without being there, unless I'm actually at the track with you. And that makes it a whole lot easier for me to calculate your fuel flows and Generally, we can see from the read files on your vehicles about where I need to be based on your map sensor and the barometric pressure outside and the weather. So I can find most of those factors from what I need to make the changes on your vehicle, because I've already tested it in my machines. I've already checked the fuel that you're running before you go, and then your weather station when you get down there. When I get that file, I'm able to use those calculations to help measure out your fuel, what's actually going to come out of those injectors at what time. And it sounds a lot more complicated than it is, but the real nature of it is fuel gets lighter the hotter it gets, and humidity makes the air going in your intake more dense. Sort of in the same sense that your your nitrous bottle works. When you use your nitrous bottle, it makes the colder, denser air charge into the engine. Humidity can do the same thing. We care about the dew point, so if you notice how things run better when we're talking about cars typically run better in the fog. Some of the lower laying valleys, places like Beach Bend, they're down near a creek and have pretty good dense air. It's a good track for power. And you get some of the higher altitude tracks, especially some of them that are in the mountains. Your air gets thinner, you get a less charge. That's when I need to know the barometric pressure again. We retune, I write you a new file and send it back to you. And I'm rather quick at it. That's how I'm able to get it done in one afternoon. And you guys have noticed how fast I'm able to get files back to you sometimes. Usually because race days, I'm already writing a few other files for people around the country. That makes it a whole lot easier on me knowing what your weather stations are. Again, I do really like this one. This is a cheap model. You can find these on Amazon. This is enough to get me what I need, and granted, I can't get a text from it or a file from it. It's enough to fill out the information and fill out the blocks that I need from you. If you're able to just text me these factors that are written on it, the only thing it doesn't have is the barometric pressure written out the way I need it. I can calculate it. This one's really fast at reading. It does a good job at taking it out in the sun. I'd like to see you take it out near the staging lanes where you're going to be running, where you're going to be building heat. But this one changes pretty fast, and it's pretty accurate. So it doesn't waste a lot of time at your track. You just able to walk it out there. Even if you want to snap me a picture of that, that makes it a lot easier on me to do some final measurements for your vehicle before you go out for your first launch. A couple of cars over the summer had a few little detonation hits. They went from a lower laying track that I was tuned at and went up higher in altitude, and it overloaded fuel, had a few little snaps, and did a little damage. And some of these engines, some of you guys that have spent quite a bit of money with me understand that I have spent every detail I can to dial in your car as tight as I can. And those factors matter a lot, especially when you go to changing tracks, or we're talking about going from spring to summer races, especially some of you boys that have gone out and run these winter runs and the no preps and stuff. If you need me to modify those files, then it's not that big a deal. I can back you off a little bit. Some of the boys that ran $1 million mile, we had them dialed in within hundredths of a second, and we were consistently on those passes, which is something to be pretty proud of. Basically bringing those cars up to about as peak performance as they can possibly run with the equipment that I've given to tune with. We're still lucky enough that the tune files that we write aren't really written into the NHRA rules very much. We're allowed to have basically full range of control on that as of right now. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, because I have been. But as far as tuning goes, it is one of those places that we are able to squeeze a lot more power out of a car according to what you're doing. Then as far as fuel quality goes too, that also matters to some of the truck drivers and some of the guys that are driving cross country with some of their classic hot rods and stuff, they need to know that the fuel that's going in their car is right. And sometimes if the car acts a little funny, we all like to jump to conclusions. Oh, this is probably the fuel, or detonation on our spark plugs. And even a way for testing those, we do that on a regular basis as well. I can't test any spark plugs right now because I got a lot of gas fumes from where I've been testing some gasoline for some folks. I'm able to do a lot of different things to help make sure everything is in top. And we're not talking about turning a couple of screws on a Holley carburetor or turning your distributor back and forth by a couple of degrees anymore. The tuning world has gotten into a much more serious, more detailed situation now, where you used to turn your distributor back and forth, a degree or so to make different passes and stuff. Well, now that distributor turning is based on your map sensor, how much air is coming into the breather, what the temperature is outside. Your RPM bandit will change accordingly. I mean, you can't get underneath your hood and hold your distributor and turn her back and forth while you're taking off down the track. But the computers we have now do actually allow for that, and pretty much every way. The same way goes with the fueling. There's about probably a couple hundred ways that I can modify just the way the fuel comes into the motor. And I'm not talking about just fuel pressure, injector timing and stuff that wasn't available before. And the later in the years you get on these motors, the more details you get, and those charts get bigger, and more details are able to be added. And it's still the same thing in spirit on like your old-fashioned 650 Holley carburetor, and same thing as your turning your old MSD distributor. Or as you remember, adding different weights to the distributor to have it sling out at different paces, things like that. Well, each one of those, consider it a chart, and those charts continue to grow, and how seriously dialed in those details can get. And that is something that I'm going to probably do some tuning videos here soon and talk about some of that, and try and talk about how some of this helps me dial some of those vehicles in. As a lot of you guys know, I don't use a chassis dyno. If we're tuning a street vehicle, we take it out on the street. I want to see what it does actually on the road. We hook up all our sensors and we run it down the road, dial in fuel efficiency, we work on traction control, all the factors that are at play for the vehicle that we're doing. If you're going to the track, we go in, as some of you know, I'll meet you down at the track, and we'll spend a day at test and tune, and dial those track times in down as tight as we can get. All of that information that I get after tuning, I store on an external hard drive or on our server, and I also store them on a cloud. I'm able to keep those files safe, and when I get that call, hey, I feel like my car's about to blow up because it's acting a fool down here at Orlando Speed World, and say a car that I had tuned for, say, Hardensburg or Beach Bend, and you go down to Orlando Speed World and try and run for some big money, and now your car is detonating and acting a fool, getting a lot of knock and things like that. Those are things I can usually dial in remotely, and a lot of you guys have obviously done that with me quite a bit. Some of those of you that haven't, I use these factors, I use the fuel factors, I use your weather station factors, I use a lot of different factors to try and use that information to dial you in as tight as I can. I have nothing against using a chassis dyno. It just typically isn't what my client base is trying to do. There are the guys that are shooting for the best dyno times they can get. That's a different story. But if we're going to the track, I want to see what the car does on the track. There's a lot more factors at play than how much power can get laid down. There's a lot of things that I'm modifying. On some of your vehicles, I'm actually modifying the braking systems, like you say, your traction control and stability control, things of that nature. Those all need to be factored in too. A pretty good example of that is some of your cars that we've pulled back some of the traction control to get a little spin out of on purpose to try and point the car in the right direction. When it pulls fuel or timing or something of that nature into those corners as you're ready to stomp back into it. Things like loading up on fuel when you go into the corner and then you jump back in the throttle and it wants to fall on its face. These are all factors that I'm able to correct if I have the right information available to me and we're working with the right equipment to make that happen. That's why so many of my client base has won so many events. I'm a little bit more universal than a box tune. But this wasn't a video about box tuning or tuning in general. It was kind of an explanation of how I'm testing your fuel when you send in samples. I'm probably going to send you another video out about how I prefer your fuel to be packaged when you send it to me. How you get it to me, on the other hand, that is up to you. You have any trouble with the U.S. Postal Office and things like that, I'm not recommending sending gasoline in the mail. And I want to say that again, I do not recommend sending gasoline in the mail. But on the other hand, how it gets to me, it doesn't matter much to me. We do have some neat tricks to getting it here. I know a lot of you guys that are close enough. I've had a few guys that have drove up from Nashville and some other places, a few hour drive just to get things checked out. And, when you do that, obviously I break it down and I actually write out the full math on it and tell you everything I can about the fuel in every way I'm able to test it. And that's what makes that useful information, because I think we've all run into that issue. Boy, I think I got some bad fuel. Well, I'm able to answer that. More often than that, we're usually finding clogged injectors here lately. Again, I've got a good way to clean those in the ultrasonic cleaner and really get those things pretty close to new. Most of the really wore slap out injectors that I've been doing, stuff that I'd actually found, I've got a good example. This is one that I had found on the floor a few weeks ago, and I don't know if I can get enough light to show you this one. If you can see in the screen or not, I don't know if it'll let us. But it's pretty clogged up. I actually have ways to deal with that as well. I'm gonna make another video on how I'm able to rebuild these. We're able to remove the screens and put fresh screens in, because we're seeing a lot of torn, dried out screens. We're able to decap these to double up the fuel flow out of these. Depending on the model, I've had some trouble out of different styles, like some of these Denzos. Typically, the EV series Delphis usually don't have a whole lot of trouble getting decapped. Actually, that was another one of those same ones. Yeah, the EV Delphis, EV1s, the EV6s, they usually don't have a whole lot of problem getting it decapped. And it's not just taking the plastic cap off. We actually take the grinder and take out the whole end and replace the spray nozzle. This is one that hasn't actually been cleaned yet, but this is a pretty good example of how they come in pretty gross. The jets are actually visually clogged. I don't know if you can see it on camera. Not really working with great light. I'm using my cell phone here, but this is really important, especially when you get into the higher horsepower ranges and you're kind of running tight on fuel, getting into the engine. That also matters for fuel efficiency and a few other factors. Of course, it's usually the fleet services that I'm adding fuel mileage to in my tuning. Obviously the performance guys, they usually demanding more fuel, bigger fuel pumps, things like that. This fuel tests also matter on a lot of your fuel pumps. So suggesting like a factory Delphi 150 fuel pump, if you tried to run any of the ethanol based fuels that are probably above anything over a 60 proof, yeah, you're probably going to start burning that pump up. A lot of fuel pumps are designed to spin at a certain pace, and ethanol is lighter than gasoline, so that pump is able to spin a bit faster, and they're notorious for burning out. That's why you want to run an ethanol-based, an ethanol-appropriate pump. Injectors kind of have the same story. You can do a little bit of damage to some of them that aren't able to flow. But honestly, you can run all the ethanol you want through, and it's actually a cleaner. It's good for your motor. I'm one of the guys that does approve of ethanol fuels. I'll probably do another explanation on why you buy the non-ethanol fuels at the gas station, why they are not on ethanol. We don't have that nowadays. It doesn't exist. So the guys with the lawnmowers and stuff, they say that ethanol fuel messed up my lawnmower. You might be right. Ethanol needs to be tuned accordingly. So a flex fuel vehicle versus a non-flex fuel vehicle that is allowing for ethanol content, if it's not adjusted properly to run on that, then yeah, it's probably going to do some damage. There are some sensors involved, say on the later third gen, actually, yeah, third gen, fourth gen Silverados and things of that nature on the fourth gen motors, and Camaros and the Vets and stuff. A lot of them are running a virtual sensor. In the later years, they did actually add a hydrometer sensor in the fuel tank. Actually, it's not in the fuel tank. It's actually on the line, outside of the fuel line. But it's the same concept. It's measuring the proof of the alcohol content based on the density of it and the temperature outside, or actually the temperature of the fuel. So that's how we test fuel, and a little bit about why we test fuel. Hope you guys have a nice night. I'm out.